Bienvenidos nuevamente a la continuidad de la serie internacional de Tiempo de Mercadeo. Las alianzas estratégicas y las alianzas en general se han convertido en uno de los aspectos más importantes no solamente en la administración de empresas, sino en el mercadeo mundial. Por eso nos hemos desplazado hasta Newton, en Massachusetts, para hablar con dos expertos, Jeffrey Schuman y Janice Twombly. Con ellos estaremos en unos minutos sobre estos temas. Ya volvemos.
Jan and Jeff, good evening and welcome to my program.
Well, thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, welcome to the Rhythm of Business.
Thank you. Let me begin by asking about the first book that you wrote. Why did you call it Everyone is a Customer? What made you think of everyone as a customer?
Well, we had actually realized in doing some other writing that when you looked at the value proposition that needed to exist amongst members of a community, members of a business community, you really needed to ensure that everyone came away from an interaction having received something of value. And that's our definition of a customer, someone who engages and receives something of value. So whether you are providing a good or serving as a business partner or actually acquiring goods or services, you must come away with something of value. So therefore, everyone is a customer.
I remember that at that time you started talking about the need for a collaboration between everyone. And then you became partners and started working with the range of businesses. Is that correct?
It's actually a little bit different sequence. We had, in the late 90s, I wrote a book called The Rhythm of Business. And the book, in the year 1999, Jen and I started to work together building a company called The Rhythm of Business. And at that point in time, actually, we were working with entrepreneurs. New England was a hotbed of entrepreneurial activity, and we were helping entrepreneurs develop this sense of timing, this sense of rhythm, and how to build a company. And when we were doing that, we realized that successful entrepreneurs not only build a company, they build a network to help them build that company, a network of individuals that have the resources that the entrepreneur needs to build his or her business. And so we started to look at those various relationships and understand that really they're different than arm's length. They were really quite collaborative. And what made them collaborative was in each relationship, the parties to that relationship came away having received something that they valued. And one of the big differences is that a lot of people, in our view, even today, still look at relationships and put 20th century kinds of labels on relationships. They'll talk about suppliers, or they'll talk about customers, or they'll talk about partners. And when you use those labels, you have different connotations about what a supplier wants or what a customer wants. And our thinking evolved that in a collaborative relationship, each party really wants to receive something that they value. And so when you think about people as, in the traditional sense, you tend to limit what might be of value to them. And so we try to come up with a very broad understanding of the value that they seek, and that's the basis of collaboration.
So what's the difference between collaboration and strategic alliance, or an alliance?
So when you look at a strategic alliance, really that, in our view, that is really just one type of collaborative relationship. We look at, again, a collaborative relationship is a relationship in which the parties to that relationship seek something that will be of value to them to accomplish what they're trying to do. In a strategic alliance, that again is it's a very important type of relationship, but it is just one type of collaborative relationship. And we tend to think of the collaborative relationships as the broad umbrella under which you can put all kinds of relationships, and alliances being one of those types of relationships. The core understanding of making an alliance successful, quite frankly, in our view, is the ability to collaborate. If you haven't got the understanding of what it takes to collaborate and really operationalize that in your dealings with one another, unlikely you'll accomplish the strategic reasons that you entered into that relationship in the first place.
If a strategic alliance is one type of collaborative work, what are the others?
Well, a strategic alliance is one word, one phrase that's used to define a collaborative relationship. And oftentimes people will use other labels like preferred supplier or partner. And it really is a continuum that, in our view, is defined by how much collaboration is needed in order to achieve your objective. As Jeff said, people are using labels that existed in 20th century business that don't have a lot of meaning today. And it really does hamper people. We need to develop a new language of referring to these different kinds of relationships. Some of the strategic alliances that we work with are true joint work efforts where both parties are committing resources, where they're both taking risk, where they're both going to benefit to some degree. They don't know at the beginning how much benefit they will get. Whereas in a traditional relationship, you know that you're buying X from somebody, you're going to get X hours of service. But in a collaborative relationship that is considered to be an alliance, you don't know what that is. Now, you can have a different degree of collaboration where maybe you're sharing some data, or maybe you're having your partner design a part of the product that you're producing, or you're co-marketing where you are providing access to customers to each other. We don't have good language yet, and then so therefore we struggle in being able to really define in language that's meaningful for many people exactly what some of the differentiations are, because it really depends upon the purpose of the relationship and how much collaboration is required in order to accomplish what you're trying to do.
Isn't the culture of an organization a requirement for an alliance, for a collaborative relationship? Because if you don't think the same way as the other, I mean, if you, not that they are after the same goals, but if you don't think the values of the company as a requirement, isn't that a problem?
The culture is really key. If your culture of an organization is one where you are very insular and you believe that you have all the smart people working for you and only you are going to be able to satisfy your customer, you're not going to be very good at collaboration. And oftentimes some of our structures that we have built up in organizations, such as procurement, such as the legal group, they can often get in the way of building collaboration. There's been some research done recently by an association that we're part of that focuses on strategic alliances, and it has shown that companies that do have a more alliance-focused culture or a more collaborative culture are indeed more successful at these types of relationships. They're very hard to do. They take a lot of work, they take a lot of communication, a lot of energy, but in today's world you can't do it alone anymore. The markets move too fast, customers move too fast, so you need to be able to partner. It's critical for any business today.
We're going to go to a commercial break and we'll be right back, okay? Vamos a ir a unos comerciales y ya regresamos. What other types of requirements do you have for an alliance? Let's say, for example, if there is a company that wants an alliance with some other company, but this company in the culture that we were talking about before we went to commercials, they don't care about, being on time or if they have financial problems. Are those requirements for an alliance?
What really matters when organizations decide to put an alliance together, first of all, in the process of putting an alliance together, one of the things you need to do in what's called the due diligence, when you're thinking about, should we do a deal with these guys? Or will we be able to work together successfully? It's not about being able to agree to the same goals. We don't need the same goals. What we have to understand is that each organization has to believes it will receive the value that it's seeking. Maybe it's introduction to new customer base. Maybe it's access of new knowledge or gaining entree into new markets or learning a new technology. So there are many reasons why companies work together. So when you're evaluating them, one of the things that's increasingly understood is, do the cultures work together? Now, what's really kind of interesting in our work, we've taken the view that what really matters is the culture of the relationship, the alliance that you form. If you will, for a simple example, say you have two companies that want to do an alliance. Each company has its own culture that's built up over time, how we do our work in our
Yes.
place, and the values and the beliefs that our people hold to be important. And the other company has its culture.
Yes, but that doesn't have to do with the mission and the vision, what Michael Porter calls the mission and the vision of the company.
Well, when you're taking a look at the work of Michael Porter and you look at, strategy, it shifts a little bit when we get into looking at the kinds of organizational structures that are becoming apparent today. In looking at coming back to the point on culture, so each organization has its own culture. When they come together, what they have to do is almost adopt an entrepreneurial mindset, that this is an entity. It's the alliance. And the alliance has to be able to develop its own culture, how we're going to work together. Because in order for the alliance to be successful, the two organizations, the people in those two organizations have to be able to work together in whatever the activities are that they're working on. One of the things that we believe to be true is we call that the third culture. You have company one's culture, company two's culture, but what matters is that amalgam, those coming together into that third culture. How that organization, that entity, even though it's not a legal entity in the majority of the cases, but from a mindset point of view, if you think about it, okay, what's the culture of that alliance? And whatever decisions are made, culture is how we make decisions, how we handle conflict, how we should communicate, and protocol on communication and so forth. That whatever we decide, the principles we decide we're going to work under have to be able to fit within the culture of company one and at the same time fit within the culture of company two. Because if the culture of the alliance, how it makes decisions, how it does those things, doesn't work in either one of the parent companies, you're going to have a problem. And it's important to keep in mind that while it's very hard to get the data, the view is that about 50% of these relationships fail. They either fail outright or they fail to accomplish the purpose for which they were created. Given our roots in entrepreneurship, I can tell you that failure rate is very similar to the failure rate of a startup. And people view starting a business as very challenging. Starting a successful alliance is very challenging because of cultural problems, because of changes in strategy on parts of organizations. And so there are myriad challenges. Understanding the cultural challenges and adopting the proper guidelines to work within those various cultures is one of the keys to making it successful.
You're going to say something?
I was just going to add on to that, then, that in addition to individual company culture, you also have to look at national culture. We work in many alliances where one partner, for example, might be French and another might be Japanese, and
My goodness, that's quite a mix.
and exactly, and more and more they're very global, and you have to take that into consideration. For example, I was talking to somebody recently who just did a partnership with an Indian company. Well, in India there are different expectations of timeliness than there is with the German company that he was working for. And they had to get used to each other, and they had to get used to the way in which they were going to work to create that third culture, as Jeff said, that encompasses both the way things are done in the business culture of their country as well as their own company culture.
How important is the size of the company?
The size can make a difference as well, because a smaller company is able to move faster, usually, not all the time, and usually able to make decisions much faster without going through layers. But the reality is that you're working usually with a small team of people inside of the bigger company, and your relationships are one-to-one. I'll never forget the time that we were at a conference and Peter Drucker was speaking. And we admire him and his work greatly, and actually
We all do.
we actually had the good fortune of speaking at a conference on the same stage with him.
I couldn't do a program with him because he said he was too old when I called him.
Oh, well, he was quite elderly, but he was still quite wise.
Oh,
And
yeah.
He made a statement to a young entrepreneur who was concerned about establishing relationships and establishing an alliance with a big company, that you don't have a relationship with the company. You have a relationship with Harry and with Sally. And it's at that personal level that you need to establish it. So you can get around the size difference in companies in an alliance.
In your experience, before we go into another topic about alliances, which companies go after others? Small companies look for big companies to get an alliance, to form a partnership, or big companies are trying to, ally with small companies?
That's a really good question, Carlos, and it's actually quite a complicated question. In industries, for example, in pharmaceutical industry, over the last decade or so, there's been a shift of the research for new products to a lot of the work has been because of the cost and the failure rate of getting new products to the marketplace. A lot of large pharmaceutical companies essentially outsource the product development to smaller firms, to biotech firms, for example. In the energy business, you got a period in the 1990s when oil was about $10 a barrel, where it was financially challenging for these large companies to be able to afford to develop the new technology to explore and produce the oil they're looking for. And they outsourced the need for the new technology to the oil field services companies like Schlumberger or Baker Hughes or Halliburton, for example. And so what wound up happening now, we jump ahead to the era that we're in right now. Pharmaceutical companies are, searching because of a lot of their blockbuster drugs have come off patent or coming off patent. They're looking for new drugs, new market areas to go into, and so they're working with a lot of smaller companies and running into issues. The energy companies are increasingly working with with smaller companies, looking for the new technology to bring into the finding and producing the oil. So you get those kinds of factors that have forced, in many instances, large companies to work with smaller companies, whereas previously, the large company working with large company. One of the challenges in working on alliances that we have seen in large companies working with smaller companies, in smaller companies, that particular asset, let's say, that they're working on with the larger company is very important to them. It might be their only asset or one of two things that they're working on. They're a smaller company, maybe a newer company. A larger company has many things going on. And while the asset that they're working on with the small company is important to the larger company, it's important inside the company relative to all the other things that it's working on might not be the same. So you get a disproportionate prioritization. And the smaller companies are looking, how come you're not paying more attention to our product than you are paying? And the larger company says, we're paying a lot of attention to it, but we have other things that we have to pay attention to. You also run into situations where a lot of startup businesses, especially in the biotechnological area, have venture funded. They haven't gone public. They still have venture capital money in there. They're looking for a point in time. The VCs are looking for quickly to realize the return on their investment. That puts pressure on these companies to do certain things faster than perhaps some of the larger companies might want to do certain things. And so that creates tensions within those relationships. But, the reality of working together with size differences is just the nature of the beast. And companies, I think, increasingly are gaining experience in figuring out how to do that successfully. There's no going away from the need to do it. So if you want to be able to be successful, you figure out how to do it.
Jen, you were going to say something, but before you do that, we'll go to a commercial break and we'll be right back, ¿ok? Vamos a ir a otra tanda de comerciales y ya venimos para que Jan nos responda o comente algo sobre lo que estaba comentando Jeff. Jan, I interrupted you when you were going to say something. What was that?
I just wanted to add to that, that Jeff said, and we do have large companies partnering with large companies. We have large companies that go after small companies looking for new technology, new innovations. We're working with a company right now that's a major consumer packaged goods company, and they go looking for new technologies, new products, new packaging, new ingredients, new flavors that they can use in their products. And oftentimes they're going after very small companies, while at the same time the small companies are knocking on their doors. Partnering is very entrepreneurial behavior. That was how we got into it to begin with, because we saw as the internet was really making business more global and was revolutionizing communication and information technology, that many entrepreneurs were building their businesses not by building up all of the infrastructure, but by surrounding themselves with many partners that help them be able to accomplish what they're trying to do. And we've seen that type of behavior move into much larger companies where partnering has become a critical part of their strategies.
Isn't it true that the more companies you have in an alliance, the more difficult it is to manage the alliance?
Yes. The more partners you add into a single alliance, definitely the more challenging it is. You have to balance all of the interests of all of the different stakeholders. As we said earlier, make sure everyone gets value, that everyone thinks that they're a customer coming away with something of value. Your governance becomes harder. It's making sure that the information flow is appropriate is harder, but that actually is a trend right now.
According to your experience, is there an ideal number of companies for an alliance, for a strategic alliance?
No, there really isn't. It depends upon what your purpose
That's
is.
the best answer to every question. Depends. Yeah.
But it's true.
You see, it
True.
is, yeah. I know
I mean,
it is.
we know of alliances. We did research on an alliance some years ago that was organized by Dow Chemical to help them bring a new material into the semiconductor manufacturing. And they had 26 companies in that alliance.
26?
26 companies.
My goodness.
And
That's like having 4 wives.
It's probably worse even. But that was what was necessary in order to introduce this disruptive technology into the marketplace. Having lots of companies in a single alliance is a rarity. More often than not, you will have a series of bilateral relationships that work together to form an ecosystem. But the relationships, the legal relationships are more one-to-one than they are with many involved. But it is increasing, the number of instances where there are lots of partners in a particular collaboration.
You see, time is up for today, so we have to leave so many things to talk about for next week, okay?
Okay.
Well, entonces nos vamos por esta noche, pero ya ven ustedes lo importante que es considerar los aspectos que se relacionan con alianzas estratégicas y con otro tipo de alianzas. Continuaremos con el tema la próxima semana en nuestra serie internacional. Los invitamos entonces para que estén muy pendientes de ello. Por el momento, muchísimas gracias y una feliz noche.